not only do you have the Biden administration who approved cluster bombs to Ukraine, even though they said they wouldn't do that, you now have the Biden administration that is sending depleted uranium to Ukraine, and we use depleted uranium in Iraq, and the cancer rate tripled. We use depleted uranium in Syria, and the cancer rate went up. So, Scott, I need you to explain this to me. How can the United States be claiming they're fighting for the Ukrainian people while they damn their people to generations of cancer and their kids may be blown up by a cluster bomb? So, what's your thoughts on the unhinged Biden administration approving these weapons that are war crimes? What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, let's be clear with the language. They're not war crimes. There's no international treaty that prohibits that the United States is a signatory to that prohibits the use of cluster munitions, and depleted uranium likewise is not prohibited by international treaty. Having said that, the United States has recognized that cluster munitions with a high dud rate that they have becomes a deadly legacy to generations that follow. That if you use cluster munitions, there's a good chance that children, farmers, innocent civilians are going to pay a price after the conflict because there'll be unexploded munitions. And so we have sought to improve these weapons, and we stopped actually using these weapons because of that threat. So we know that by using this weapon, we create a harm to future generations, and yet we give the Ukrainians unlimited access to these weapons, allowing them to pollute the landscape with unexploded cluster bombs. And I can guarantee you that the price that the children of this region are going to pay in the decades to come will amount to thousands of lives lost and/or maimed because of this decision. But remember, we're the United States that had Madeleine Albright look in the camera and say that 500,000 Iraqi children was a price we were willing to pay to get rid of Saddam Hussein. So, yay, America! Depleted uranium, as you pointed out, it's not a radiological threat, meaning it's not gamma radiation, beta radiation. It's a heavy metal toxin, but nonetheless, when it gets in your body, it creates cancer, high levels of cancer. When we use depleted uranium, the penetrator, when it hits, it vaporizes. It turns, and that's part of helps penetrate the armor to get the effect of killing the tank. But when it vaporizes, those particles are released into the atmosphere. They go into the dirt and they get down there. They get into the water you drink. They get into the crops. The air when it doesn't rain, it turns into dust. You breathe it. In Iraq today, if people go look, there's photographs of the deformed children, the children that are born with these. Fortunately, I shouldn't say fortunately, but I mean thankfully for them, many of them die stillborn, meaning that they don't have to suffer, but many of them live, and you can't imagine the life of a severely deformed, retarded, and what that does with their families and the mothers that get cancer as a result. The father, it's horrible. In Kosovo, NATO used depleted uranium rounds, and the level of cancer in the areas where we use these is sky high. But the United States won't admit it. We deny this, but we know what the truth is, and yet we're giving this weapon to the Ukrainians. And fortunately, the good news is these are anti-tank rounds being provided for the M1 Abrams tank, 31 of which are going to be provided to the Ukrainians. I don't believe they're going to have the opportunity to fire too many of these rounds. Hopefully, the Russians kill these tanks quickly, and along with the ammunition that they have. But it doesn't matter. We know that depleted uranium causes long-term health problems for the civilian populations. And so yet what we've done with cluster munitions and depleted uranium is provide something that isn't going to turn the tide of the battle. These are not miracle weapons. They're not going to beat the Russians. It's done for political purposes, so our politicians can look good, puff out their chest, and say, we're doing something. And yet there's going to be families, Ukrainian and Russian families going forward, whose children are going to be maimed, whose children are going to be deformed because of this. And every American has to reflect on that. This is on us. This is on us collectively. This is our responsibility because it's our government doing this in our name. We're sending the cluster munitions. We're sending the depleted uranium because we're not doing enough to stop this. I know you're speaking out. I speak out. but I'm talking about 320 to 330 million Americans who aren't saying a damn thing about this because they don't care. They simply don't care. It's happening over there. It's not happening here. Well, if you live in the city of Flint, Michigan, all the outrage you have about your water, which is justifiable outrage, understand this. The same government that's poisoning your water is poisoning the Ukrainian soil right now. What are you going to do about it? Why are you being silent? Do you want other people to be silent about what's happened to you? You want everybody to speak up in defense of you. So don't be hypocrites. Stand up and
Yes.
speak out in defense of the people that we're poisoning overseas. Everywhere in America, every community that has a problem where we say the government is imposing unjust restrictions or unjust things, polluting our water, polluting our soil, doing things. You cannot be silent as our government does the same thing to other people overseas. We have to be consistent in our outrage about the
Absolutely.
bad policies of the American government.
Yeah, I appreciate your perspective on the weapons, and that's a great point and something I emphasize a lot because they're like a lot of these progressive scumbags, as I consider them. They all support the Ukraine war. I'm I view these people with maximum disdain because they apologize and they adore Joe Biden, the Nord Stream pipeline bomber. They don't care about that, even though they quote unquote environmentalists. So not only do we have 300 plus million people who don't care about war, you got progressives who enable the Democrats who perpetrate these crimes against humanity.